Hey, it's news from heaven. Angels read our minds at different levels. That sounds like a lot of news, but I would contend that the word that seems like it's the most boring word in that title, which is levels, no offense, is actually the most fascinating concept as we dig into this. And here we have, look at this, we're talking about angels and we're talking about the mind, and we're talking about an intimate relationship between the two, and that is part and parcel of the Swedenborg experience. And really, I would say it's called for. I think it's called for, because if there's anything that doesn't make sense, it's the world of the mind. What is going on in consciousness? And why is there this dichotomy where it's so easy for us in pop culture and anywhere else, other kinds of culture, to depict things as you've got the angel and the devil on the shoulder, right? There definitely seems to be, and sure, there's a bunch of confusing stuff in the middle. You know, there's this stuff here that seems to be neither for or against us, but there definitely are these flashes that come through. And if not in you personally, certainly in the human race, there are people who get driven by their minds to end their own lives. There are people who get driven by their minds to commit horrific crimes. There's also people who just live day to day, and this, I'm starting to get closer to all of us, just beaten down by these aggressive negative assessments of everything that happens. What's going on there? But then there's these moments of, that's a little extreme, these moments of clarity and insight and peace and hope. There just seems to be these different ways of seeing the world. And where's all that coming from? And how do we possibly step in to the light a little more often? So this is where, is there a larger connection to what is angelic, and which is that being a vessel for what is divine, and what's going on? How aware are these angels of what's going on in our mind, and what goes on in our mind? These are all the questions. The book we're doing today, by doing I mean reading, is Divine Love and Wisdom. You can download it for free and follow along. This is number 278, and we begin with levels. I told you, levels are what's happening. Levels are going to be big. There is a reason that our physical acts look so simple and plain to the eye, like the outer forms of seeds, fruits, and eggs, and like almond nuts in their kernels, when in fact they contain within themselves all the prior elements that have given rise to them. Is that the award for I think we're going to give this the award for strangest opening sentence that doesn't mention anything like spirits or angels or that sort of thing. Because what are we talking about? Our physical acts look simple. Our physical acts look like nuts and fruit and eggs. What's he talking about? Well, if you think about the outer forms, as he's talking here, of seeds, fruits, and eggs, you have a situation where a lot of things in nature have a complex inner core. If you think about a seed of some kind, there's this outer shell that's really not that complex. If you zoom in on it with a microscope, it's got a lot of stuff going on, but not nearly as much as within it. There's this little vital germ that has all this DNA in it, and there's so much potential in there, and that's the thing that actually allows the sprouting of the plant, and the growing, and all of those things. So he's saying, but he's comparing our actions to this simplistic seed outer layer. The reason for this is that every final form is a covering that serves to mark it off from its antecedents. Then, too, every level is enveloped with a membrane that serves to mark it off from another. So you've got these pieces of order in here. You just have to have barriers and boundaries, even for something that's one thing like a seed, to be able to function. Okay, all right, I got it. As a result, elements of the first level are unrecognizable to the second level, and elements of this are unrecognizable to the third level. Lest we fly off into outer space or into the vanishing ether in our thinking, let's get a really concrete example. This is not the example he's about to give here, but elsewhere. I think it's even in this book. How would I know? But I think it's in this book. Here's how he talks about levels. Because levels are something that comes up across Swedenborg, and to know it at certain points, he seems to indicate this is essential knowledge to us getting how the spiritual side of reality works. So here's a simple walkthrough of levels. Let's say we've got 3 levels here. He talked about physical actions. And here we got level 1. She is climbing up and she says, I got to grab this thing so I can keep climbing higher. So you reach out your arm and just grab it. That's the action. Maybe there's 2 parts to it, right? The reach and the grab. That's what it seems like. And you can say, okay, arm moves forward. That is level 1. But that's only how it appears, how it seems to us if we're watching or experiencing it. What's really going on, if you look a level deeper, at level 2, is that movement is not just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 10 movements. It is literally hundreds of movements. I mean, how many, if you look at, you've got this muscle and this muscle and this muscle are working together, sometimes pulling with, sometimes pulling against, sometimes stabilizing. These muscles are doing the same thing. There's a bunch of tendons in here. Look at what starts to get here. How complex is this getting here? How many different muscles, how many different tendons? Look at what's in the hand. There's probably thousands of pieces here. I mean, just looking at muscles and ligaments and tendons and however all that works, is it 10,000? No, I think that might be. Either way, it's a lot more than an arm. There's a lot going on here. This is the second level, and this is basically incomprehensible from that. You could see some indication of it, but you would never be able to just intuit that there's this much going on from watching the first level. That's what it is to be incomprehensible. But really, why are there all these ripples and things in the muscle? It's because if this is still just a very simplistic picture of it. If you look closely, what's going on is this, okay? All these different cells are working. They all have, there's these different muscle cells that are firing, which means they're like using their axons and dendrites. Maybe that's not what they do. They use ATP and they hook onto each other. Come on, think back to biology. What is it? They grab on, they fire, they recharge. There's so much going on here, and it's actually very different from this first action, this level 3 here. This reaching and grabbing, you're seeing something maybe analogous to that, but it's so much, putting the right chemicals in this spot and then opening this chamber so these things come in and out, and coordination of many, many, many different parts here. And how many, there's trillions and bazillions of these things in here. So this level is incomprehensible when you look at this level, just like this level is incomprehensible when you look at that level. So think of that. That's what we're talking about, levels. That there are different, and this is a whole different vibe, a whole different kind of action. There would be a different soundtrack to this, just like there's a different soundtrack to this, just like there's a different soundtrack to that. Okay? That's how it would work physically. But look now at how he describes these levels playing out in our mindscapes. For example, right, so we're back to the examples here. For example, the love of our volition, which is the first level of our mind. Okay. So somehow we are here setting up a human mind. And I'm going to draw the head of a person. But don't be fooled into thinking we're talking about, if I say, look, there's a first level here, and then there's a second level, and then there's a third level. Don't be fooled into thinking it's just a stack like this, because we saw, remember, levels are more like this. And when Swedenborg talks about the first heaven and the second heaven and the third heaven, to be in the first heaven is to be open to love and wisdom, to be open to the Lord in a general way, like as general and simplistic as the action level. So we get the basics of what's going on. To be open in this to the second heaven is like, we've let love and truth in so that we're really, even these little micro actions are being guided by love and truth. The third heaven is every part of every cellular bit of your spirit is channeling in love and truth, is all in divine order. That's what these heavens are. So this is not what the levels of the mind look like, but this is our limits of our ability to draw them. And by our, I mean mine. That first, the love of our volition, which is the first level of our mind. So the first level, we'll put it down here. We'll put it up here. This is the love of, this is our volition. So this is our will. This is the love that drives us, okay? Which is first level of mind, is discernible in the wisdom of our discernment. So this is, wisdom is the second level here. So this is the motivations, this is the intelligence or the rationality that supports that, is discernible in the wisdom of our discernment, which is the second level of the mind, only by a kind of delight in thinking about something. So we all go through our day fallen in love with certain trains of thoughts. Maybe we're running through an argument in our heads. Maybe we are chewing over something that we read. Maybe just something's come to us and we are thinking it over. And Swedenborg would guarantee us that the reason we are thinking this over is that there's some emotional reward to doing it. It could be because, I'm going to separate this out. There's a whole side of this thinking which was represented so beautifully here by what we feel like is attacking us, that we can be thinking about something out of fear, right, of some kind of fear, but still underlying that fear is the idea that this thinking is going to somehow protect. So it's the joy of safety, even if it doesn't feel like it can be accomplished. But let's focus instead on this side for right now, because that's what he's referring to, which is that here we're thinking over something because we like it. We like thinking about that. And we're not even totally sure why, but he's saying that's the only glimpse we get of what's really motivating us in our thinking. Like this is like the cellular level, this is like the muscle level. So only in this thinking, which we can tell is going on, do we get a little bit of a sense of what really motivates us as a person. Isn't it weird that we are this mystery to ourselves? You ever think about that? That it's just fine to talk about like, I finally really figuring out who I am, or why did I do that? What was I thinking? Or I feel like I don't know, is this really me? Or there is this sense that there's a part of us we understand, but then there's a part of us that is a mystery. It's beyond our horizon, that we can't really tell who we are. Go find yourself. This is everybody acknowledges that there's something like that. So isn't that weird? Like, what are we? And Swedenborg says there's the levels of which we are not conscious. And the primary motivator, like who we really are, what we really love, is only indirectly visible to us. And he's given us here, this is the goods on how you find that level of yourself. So only by kind of delight in thinking about something. That first level, the level of our volition, is discernible in the knowledge of our memory, which is the third level, only as a kind of pleasure found in being knowledgeable and in talking. So here you have, and this is not the only way he ever divides up the mind, but this is like everything you've accumulated here. This is your machine of processing that, and this is why you do it. This is why we bother thinking about that. And here he's saying like, oh yeah, well, part of it is, there's a pleasure in being knowledgeable and in talking. You like to hear the sound of your own voice in this case. But what does that mean? It could be because you really believe what you're expressing. It could be because you want to appear knowledgeable. Who knows? But there are these levels in what we do, and we don't even always realize what's going on there. The obvious conclusion from this, yes, please, I don't know what we're talking about. What is the obvious conclusion? The obvious conclusion from this is that a deed that is a physical act encloses all these elements, even though it seems as simple as can be in its outward form. Okay. So what that means is, he talks about this level too, the memory being the level we act from. So if this leads us to do something, within that act, there is what really motivates us, what we really believe, and what we've learned. And that's all in there, just like there's a physical layering inside this. How many arrows can I draw towards this? Just like there's a physical layering towards this act, there's a psychological layering for us as well. Because there's a reason why we're grabbing this next thing. It's obvious that because we want to go higher, but why do we want to go higher? Why are we exercising in the first place? What is the goal of our life? That in this act, all that stuff is there. Deep down to what really drives us as a human being, our core beliefs about life, it's all in there. It would just be very hard for us to tease out, but not hard for certain other characters who are about, I feel, to be introduced. In support of this is the fact that the angels who are with us, by the way, there's angels with us all the time. there are, in fact, at least two directly interacting with two parts of our minds, but there can also be communities, that our minds are very much citizens of the spiritual world, which is where angels, which are people who have graduated on to the next life, as we're all headed towards, and who, as I said before, what is an angel? You're open to these different levels. You've opened to the Lord on the simple level, on the complex level, and on the very complex level. That's what that's what transitions our minds from where we are now to being an angel. So you got these angels with you all the time. Doesn't matter how stormy it gets. They are there, or else we would know it, because we would cease to function consciously. And these angels who are with us are aware in detail of the actions of our minds within our deeds. There's actually, this is where we get into the mind reading, there's actually a cool quote Swedenborg has floating around somewhere, which is that the same action done by 1,000 different people can look 1,000 different ways to angels. That's a paraphrase. But you and I can both go do the exact same thing. But it's completely different to an angel, because an angel doesn't just see the action, they see the motivation behind that action, and they see the rational process and what that says about our beliefs that got us there. So you can see, oh, this person and this person both did this thing, and maybe it's a terrible thing. It doesn't mean they both meant the same thing by it. It doesn't mean that they both believe the same things. That actually there's a huge diversity of spiritual states that can lead us to those actions. Spiritual angels perceive what is enclosed from our discernment, and heavenly angels what is enclosed from our volition. So it's like spiritual angels are seeing this on the intellectual side, or like the muscle side in our diagram, and then heavenly angels are seeing our motivations, what we hope to gain by this action. This may seem like a paradox. If you're sitting there saying, well, paradox would be nice, because paradox, at least you're to the point where you're saying, I get these two things he's trying to assert, but they don't seem to make sense with each other. I could totally see being at the, wait, what are we even talking about in the first place? But if you're with me to the level of paradox, he assumed we would be there as well. This may seem like a paradox, but it is true. It does need to be realized, though, that the mental elements involved in a contemplated or present deed are in the center, with the rest surrounding in proportion to their relevance. And this is where we get to the concrete nature of the spiritual world, which is the concrete nature of the mind. That in here, just like you have the structure of the seed that I showed you on the other page, where there's something in the middle and then there's a casing around it, and we think, oh, that's something very concrete that has a defined substance to it and boundaries, and that's something we can use to think about motivations and thoughts and things, which are just these ephemeral things that have no shape. He's saying, no, that actually that stuff, the motivations in our deeds, is into the spiritual dimension of life as concrete and as structured as a seed is here. So he's actually talking about which elements are inside what elements, how a mental and emotional phenomenon is constructed. How is that not interesting? I'm telling you, the kids these days, they're not interested in that. I can't believe it. So this may seem like a paradox, but it is true. All right. It does need to be realized, though, that the mental elements involved in a contemplated or present deed are in the center, with the rest surrounding in proportion to their relevance. Angels say that they perceive what someone is like from a single deed, though the image of someone's love will vary depending on the way it finds definition in desires and therefore in thoughts. This is why an angel can read your mind just by one thing that you do, because within that thing is all the information you got. It's deep down and buried, but it's all the information of who you are and what you believe and what you're doing and what you've learned. Like, we are just like physically in Swedenborg's day, there would be no analog to this. But now I know that if I just put my hand on this table and lift it up, somebody can come over later, swab that thing, put it in a a lab machine, I don't know, a DNA testing machine, and know who I am, right? And actually know a lot of things about me, my genetic heritage, my predisposition to certain diseases or whatever. Know a lot of things about me that I didn't even know about myself, because all the physical information about who I am, or actually a lot of it, because the DNA wouldn't reflect, like if I have a cold right now or something. But that's pretty amazing that you can know so much about somebody from that. And Swedenborg is saying the spiritual DNA, who we are, is inside our actions, and angels can swab that and sense that, no problem. Even though who we are manifests itself differently in different actions, depending, it still is there in full. In brief, every one of the acts or deeds of a spiritual person is like, okay, let's just see if we can't go zooming off farther into the universe here. Every one of the acts or deeds of a spiritual person is like a delicious, nourishing, beautiful fruit to angels. A fruit that yields flavor, nourishment, and pleasure when it is sliced and eaten. So you can, and whether that means that actually is nourishment to angels, and that your good actions actually do feed them, or whether it's just, wow, look, that's a really nice action, just like a nice piece of nutrition is, I don't know. On angels having this kind of perception of our actions and deeds, see 220 above. If you want to go look at it, it's there. And just for good measure, here at the end, let's throw in that it's the same with our speech. Angels recognize our love from the sound of our speech, our wisdom from the way the sound is articulated, and our knowledge from the meaning of the words. They also tell me that these three elements are in every word, because a word is like a realization that has the sound, the articulation, and the meaning within it. So your thumbprint is on every word as well. Angels of the third heaven have told me that they sense from any word a speaker says in a sentence the general state of that individual's mind and some specific states as well. The good news is angels, again, being people who are opened up to the divine, which the divine is nothing but love for every individual person, including you. To me, it's great news if they can figure out who I am, because I would sure love to be diagnosed. Like, okay, what's up with me? What spiritual state am I in? Who am I? This will be great information to know if it's coming from a place of wanting to help, which it most assuredly is. And the cool thing, too, about it is it gives you this sense of like, oh, there is order in the chaos. It just feels like the picture of our minds that we get is all this swirling weirdness, and is it going anywhere? But the idea that it can be all encapsulated in a single thing and known and then acted on, to me says, okay, there is an order and there is something guiding, and this all can be headed somewhere really good. And that's the news from heaven. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reading. And thank you for commenting if you don't mind. Just let me know how this hits you and what you do with it. What does it turn into? And let each other know too, because we're going to need to make this into something that people can go out and use. Like and subscribe. And if you think you're subscribed, think again. Well, I mean, click the bell. The bell is what makes it so that you get notifications from us and you won't miss an episode of all this cool, weird stuff that we're talking about here. Thanks, everyone. Hope that this does something good for you today, and I'll talk to you soon.